So what do you think was one of the most popular hobbies in the Middle Ages? I bet art theft wasn't your first guess. And we're not talking about stealing a few paintings here and there. Nope. We're talking about stealing the most valuable, most sacred treasures imaginable, the actual bones of saints.
Yeah, you heard that right. So, how exactly do you smuggle a saint? It sounds like a punchline to a joke, right? But believe it or not, people in the Middle Ages had some seriously creative answers. And that brings us to our very first story, which involves a couple of ambitious merchants and one of the most famous saints in all of Christianity. Okay, so picture this. It's the 9th century. Two merchants from Venice show up in Alexandria, Egypt. But they're not there for spices. They're on a secret mission to steal the body of Saint Mark the Evangelist. So they get the body, but now they have a huge problem. How do you get a saint's body past the port inspectors? Well, their solution was brilliant and very medieval. They just hid the body in a big basket and covered the whole thing with slabs of pork. See, the local officials were Muslim, and since pork is considered unclean in Islam, they didn't even want to get close to it. And just like that, they smuggled one of the most important figures in Christianity right out of the country.
Okay, so why go to all that trouble? I mean, really, hiding a body in pork? Well, what's so fascinating is that this heist wasn't just about faith, not at all. Back in the 9th century, the city of Venice was on the rise, but it had a massive branding problem. Yeah, you heard me. It was getting rich from trade, sure, but it was missing one absolutely crucial thing: a big-name, A-list patron saint.
You gotta understand, in the Middle Ages, saints were serious business. Owning the relics of a famous saint was like having a modern-day superstar move to your town. Pilgrims would flock from all over the world to see them. And what do pilgrims bring? Donations. And what do donations bring? Money. A lot of money. Enough to build these incredible, magnificent cathedrals, which, you guessed it, just attracted even more pilgrims. It was this powerful economic engine. Rome had St. Peter. Santiago de Compostela had St. James. Venice. Well, Venice had a bunch of canals and a whole lot of ambition. So they figured, why not solve their little branding problem with some creative acquisition? So the Venetians proved it could be done. You could actually smuggle a saint, but their whole hide-it-in-the-pork method was just one way to do it. Turns out, there were a bunch of different styles when it came to, well, acquiring holy relics without asking first. Let's dive into 3 totally different approaches.
All right, so on one end of the spectrum, you have the long con. This is the patient monk approach. We're talking deep infiltration, building trust over years. It's a spy movie. Then, on the complete opposite end, you have the Viking method. Let's just say it was a bit more direct. Forget subtlety. This was all about showing up, smashing everything, and grabbing whatever glittered. And when I say the monk method required patience, I am not kidding. Take the monks from Conques in France. They really wanted the relics of a saint named Faith from a rival town. So, what did they do? They sent one of their own guys to go undercover at the other monastery. His mission was simple: blend in, become one of them, earn their trust, and just wait for the perfect moment to strike. And he waited and waited. He didn't wait for a few weeks or even a few months. This guy waited for 10 full years. Can you even imagine that level of commitment?
Now, let's flip to the other side, the Vikings. To them, a monastery wasn't some sacred holy site. Nope. It was a treasure chest, just waiting to be cracked open. They basically saw them as excellent shopping malls. And they weren't after the bones or the art. What they wanted was the flashy packaging, the gold and silver boxes called reliquaries that held the relics. They just storm in, grab everything shiny, and melt it all down. But here's the crazy irony. Sometimes they'd leave behind these beautiful handwritten books, eliminated manuscripts, because, well, paper wasn't worth as much as gold. So these violent raiders accidentally became literary preservationists. Wild, right? Okay, so we've got the spy and we've got the brute force attack. But then there's the third method, just walking in and taking it. I'm serious. In the 11th century, a bunch of sailors from Bari, Italy decided they didn't have time for all that cloak and dagger stuff or the smash and grab. They just sailed to a town called Myra, marched right into the main church, told the monks to get out of the way, and broke open the tomb of St. Nicholas. Yes, that's St. Nicholas, the original Santa Claus. And their excuse? They claimed they were rescuing him. A rescue, of course, that just so happened to make their home city incredibly rich and famous.
But look, as bold as those heists were, they were small time. They pale in comparison to what went down in the year 1204. Because this wasn't about a couple of monks or a boatload of sailors. This was about an entire army turning into a massive crew for what was, without a doubt, the biggest art heist of the entire Middle Ages. And this all revolves around the Fourth Crusade. Now, it was supposed to be this grand campaign to go and reclaim Jerusalem for Christendom. That was the plan anyway. But here's the thing about crusades. They are ridiculously expensive. And this one, well, it ran into some serious money problems fast. Before you know it, a whole mess of political deals and IOUs completely derailed the mission and pointed the entire army in a brand new direction.
So where were they heading now? Not the Holy Land, no. Their new target was Constantinople, the glittering capital of the Byzantine Empire. And you have to understand, in 1204, Constantinople was the richest Christian city on the planet. It was basically a city-sized museum, just overflowing with 1,000 years of art, gold, and holy relics. And it was now right in the crosshairs of a very broke and very, very motivated Crusader army.
What happened next was just a total free-for-all. For 3 straight days, the Crusaders just sacked the city. They stripped churches, palaces, monasteries, everything. And one of the most famous things they stole? 4 gigantic, ancient bronze horses that stood in the city's main stadium. And who took them? The Venetians, of course. They shipped them all the way back to Venice and put them right on top of St. Mark's Basilica, the exact same church they built to house the saint they'd stolen all those centuries before. It all comes full circle, doesn't it?
So, by now you're probably thinking, how on earth did they get away with this? I mean, stealing a saint has to be like the biggest sin you can commit, right? Well, the medieval world had this absolutely brilliant, almost perfect excuse baked right into their belief system. It was a concept called Furtum Sacrum. In Latin, that literally means holy theft. And the logic went something like this. A saint is super powerful, right? Even after they're dead. So if someone manages to steal their bones, well, it couldn't have happened unless the saint let it happen. It wasn't a crime, it was a miracle. See? The saint just wanted to move to a new town. And this brings us right back to our super patient monk, the one who waited 10 years to steal the relics of Saint Faith. After he pulled it off, did the monks of Conques admit they'd committed a decade-long theft? Of course not. Oh no. They put out a press release, basically, explaining that Saint Faith had apparently grown tired of her old home and had miraculously signaled that she wanted to live in their monastery instead. It's the perfect alibi, isn't it? So all this stealing and smuggling and these so-called miraculous relocations had a huge effect. It didn't just move a few bones around. It created an enormous continent-wide black market for holy relics. Every town, every church, everybody wanted a piece of a famous saint. But there was one tiny problem. The supply of authentic saints was, pretty limited. And this supply and demand issue led to a very weird problem. Saints started to multiply. You'd have multiple churches all claiming to have the exact same unique body part. For instance, you could go on a tour of Europe and see the head of John the Baptist in at least 3 different cities. The famous theologian John Calvin even joked that if you gathered up all the pieces of wood that people claimed were from the true cross, you'd have enough to build a whole cargo ship. It became a market where a good story was often way more valuable than actual proof. When you step back and look at it, all of these heists literally redrew the cultural map of Europe. Art, relics, and priceless books moved across entire kingdoms. Which leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to think about. Did all this incredible art survive the chaos of history in spite of all these thieves, or was it actually because of them? Were these thieves, ironically, the very people who saved these treasures for us to see today?